Welcome back to Conservative Conversations. I am your host, Reid.
And I'm Frank.
Today we're going to be talking about Canada gets a new Prime Minister and a few other interesting topics. So let's get started. But before we do, I'd like to remind you to please follow us on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you would like to hear an extra segment, you can become a paid subscriber through our podcast host, Red Circle.
All right, and in today's news, at least as of the recording of this episode, March 10th, 2025, Canada now has a new Prime Minister, a guy named Mark Carney, who I still don't know too much about, but I learned a couple of things. The first thing, from one of the major news networks or whatever that I heard about him is that he's considered an outsider.
Huh.
I guess because he hasn't really led a quote-unquote political career up till now.
Uh-huh.
But then in another thing, when I did a little bit more research on him, I found out that he's actually a former central banker. So that's not as that's not as far outside the system as the first network kind of billed him as.
Right.
You know what I mean? To be a
kind of
central...
like a New York real estate kind of guy, right?
But so I still don't know that much about him, but the former central banker thing kind of gives me weird vibes. And he's already been out, I mean, at least in the things I have seen publicly from him, he's talking about basically that he hates Trump. I mean, that's me reading in between the lines, but he seems to have a grudge against Trump, doesn't like him, and he's hyping up this rhetoric about the tariffs and having to deal with America's, I guess like hostile towards Canada now and this whole kind of thing, right? So he's the man of the hour. He's going to duke it out with Donald Trump. I just sort of wish him luck. I don't know who he is, but I already don't feel like I like him, and I guess we'll see where it goes, huh?
Yeah, I hadn't really read or watched anything about, the new Prime Minister other than I saw the headlines this morning. And that's definitely not the name I had expected you to say. I thought you might have said that other guy who's got, like, that French name.
Yeah, I was hoping it'd be him too. We covered him before.
I can't remember what it is. I'm sure I wouldn't pronounce it correctly even if I did.
I don't know why I can't think this minute, but I'm sure he's still the opposition leader.
Yeah, right. But that is interesting. I'm curious to see how willing he is to work with Trump compared to Trudeau. But from what you're seeing, from what you've seen so far, it doesn't seem like he'll be that much better.
I actually get the feeling it's going to be worse because Trudeau at least had this thing where, like, he, in that whole sort of snake oil salesman kind of political stripe, he, like, wanted to be liked by people and had this, good image of himself he always wanted to portray and everything. So even though he tried to act tough on Donald Trump, he was also quick to cave, quick to go meet with him at Mar-a-Lago. And this other guy seems like right off the bat, he's just coming in hostile. So I don't see, without that whole sort of, the way he doesn't at least have a track record in the same way that Trudeau does of having to bend the knee and work with people and turn the other cheek and that kind of thing. So it just sort of going to be interesting to see, how he, if he walks the walk the way he talks the talk, because his talk is sounding pretty inflexible right now.
Yeah, it's that'll be interesting to watch how it works with their new leader and them being our partners.
Well, and there's been a lot going on, not just with the tariffs, but supposedly there was this report leaked, and I could tell you some kind of, royal something organization within the government. A memo was leaked stating that over the next 5 years, Canadians, are about to be shocked by just how broke Canada actually is. There's supposed to be some big economic things in the works that are set to shake up Canada pretty vigorously within the next 5 years. And you'll see that's sort of cited in one of the same sources that I sent you for this story. But so, I mean, it's just going to be interesting. They already know that they're hurting economically, and this guy's coming to power, doesn't want to cooperate with the United States, at least based off of the things that he has said publicly.
Right.
And it just seems like, there's going to be some bad economic things happening up there in Canada. Some big shocks.
Right? Well, I mean, that can kind of bring me to something I was going to talk about, which is, as of today, again, as we're recording, the stock market has been taking quite the beating. I don't know the exact percentage that some of the indexes are down, but they're pretty significant, and certainly on the business channels, it's quite the talk of today. And I actually put up an article on our website, contempconserv.net, about this similar issue just last Friday morning, when the market had already been experiencing a little bit of a shakeup. And it was mostly about, if you're somebody who invests in the stock market, particularly for long-term investments, like retirement or just like long-term emergency funds, things like that, it's not anything you should be worried about. In fact, you should see it as a perfect buying opportunity, which we mentioned here or there before in past episodes. We talked about the market. And particularly today, since it's been getting quite shaken up, would have been a great time to take advantage of it.
Yeah, historically, the market has always recovered, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes quickly, sometimes, a couple years, other times it might take almost a decade. The recovery out of the 2008 crash took a little while.
Yeah, but look at the charts, study them, folks.
Right.
It always happens.
Yep. But there are plenty of things that cause the markets to react this way. Tariffs are one of them, like we were just talking about, some of the retaliatory tariffs from Canada and Mexico,
China.
And China. People have uncertainty about how the tariffs will affect various aspects of the market, and even things like the budget, when the government's trying to pass their new budget, so they're not quite sure how that's going to go. That creates uncertainty and can lead to market declines, too.
Well, and I saw a particular line out of China where they had called President Trump or his administration, something along that lines, something like a flip-flopper or, I want to say like an Indian giver or something like that, that he's had mixed messages and whatever. I mean, I don't even know what they're referring to except for maybe the way, those first round of tariffs on Canada and Mexico got walked back like the very next day.
Right.
And that kind of thing. But there seemed to be some hard-hitting language out from China about this. Like, they're ready to go toe-to-toe, too. So it's interesting. There's definitely some rockiness and some waves happening.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I know, like, there's a big deadline. I think it's April 2nd for some tariffs to kick in. But particularly these retaliatory and the reciprocal ones, I suppose more of the reciprocal ones, I mean, the idea of them being reciprocal is all the other country has to do is lower theirs, and we'll lower ours.
Yeah.
But it remains to be seen who's gonna.
Well,
come to
there's
the
some
negotiating
element
table.
of a wash
Right.
too, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, if you're trying to make X number of dollars, we'll increase ours so you don't get to na.
Right.
Right? So it's almost like it eliminates the effectiveness of the tariff by having the retaliatory or reciprocal tariff there.
Yeah. But also, speaking of the budget bill, I just saw 2 different opinion pieces regarding the budget bill that I thought were kind of interesting. One was from David Horowitz. He wrote it on The Blaze. And then the other was from Eric Teetsler, Teetsel, Teetsel, who wrote his piece for The Federalist. And Daniel Horowitz is more against the continuing resolution, and this Eric Teetsel is for the continuing resolution. And I thought both of them made pretty good points. And I'm still not exactly sure where I really land on it all. But this Eric fella mostly agrees what we had talked about last week, is how it'd be great just to see the continuing resolution passed, so then after that we can really start focusing on like the budget cuts and the 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 budget's going forward after that.
Right.
And David Horowitz's point in his piece is that one, this continuing resolution is, it passes a bill that is the same amount of budget and spending that the Biden-Harris administration passed for the last bill. But I don't know why I keep saying bill, but budget. And it includes a bunch of money to all these programs that Doge is trying to cut money from. And he also makes a point that just about any time we pass these continuing resolutions and work on the reconciliation bills afterwards, we, as Republicans, we hardly ever get what we want, and it's usually the Democrats who help get it passed. And it usually has a lot more spending in it, a bunch of crap. And another point that David Horowitz made is that as we get closer to the next election, political capital gets smaller, and it's going to be potentially harder to get some of these, like budget cuts and stuff, passed. So I thought, both sides have made pretty good points.
Well, I can tell you, if you don't mind me jumping in.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's just that I definitely agree with the first guy you talked about a little bit more. I'm still at where we were the last time we discussed this.
Mm-hmm.
I basically still have my same points, so I won't really harp on those because I would refer people back to those, or I'm sure I will briefly, make it apparent where I stand on this. But I can tell you that David Horowitz's position, although it's sort of idealistic, and I like that, I support it. I mean, I get where he's coming from. I think it's a good point. We've got the political capital right now. We have the mandate.
Right, yeah.
Even though the Democrats want to deny that, we have a mandate.
Mm-hmm.
I understand. But I think it's overly ideal. And that's my thing, is it's almost like a little kid's dream that this Mr. Smith goes to Washington kind of moment where now's the time, we're going to put the whole government down on its knees and they're going to beg us for their next step or their next breath or whatever. We're going to fix this right now.
Right.
Okay, well, I just think it's sort of ridiculous that we're going to have a David versus Goliath moment right now on March whatever. We had, whatever the dates were. I don't remember now. Whenever the government runs out of funds. I think it was the 14th
Yeah, it's
or
the 14th.
something.
It's coming Friday as we're recording.
Yes. So, I don't know why with 4 days notice, even though they've had more, let's just say 4 days notice for now, that they're going to do it. Who's going to do it? I mean, is David Horowitz going to be the guy that takes, the Goliath of the government down right now because he's making a good point? No, I don't think so. I don't think there's anybody really there right now in this moment who can do it, who can topple. And I think what we're talking about, this idea of political capital that we have any right now, I think you could burn it just as easily. If you say right now's the time, today's the day, we're going to do it. We're going to face Goliath. We're going to have a shootout. I think whatever political capital you have could just go up in smoke right there too, because maybe now's not the time and now's not the moment. And, like I said before, I don't see why for once everything could be wrong and that this political capital could continue to grow and there could be a groundswell of support in the midterm cycle. And we have more Republicans come in to back up and beef up these majorities that we have so they're not so tight.
Right.
And then that's what I would tell you. We have Trump in the presidency. We keep the House. We keep the Senate. We grow that majority. And that's when I think that's your time.
Right. Well, and I believe one of the points that Eric had said in his opinion piece is that it's going to be easier now to get the CR passed because I think it has a lower threshold for the votes compared to the reconciliation, which I believe has to have 60 votes in the Senate. And another thing that was counter to David Horowitz's point about the money that's basically going to be put back to USAID, this Eric Teetsel guy had a pretty good line that I thought was kind of funny. It's like almost the equivalent to as, well, it's, with Doge in place, because essentially his point is that, okay, yeah, USAID is going to get refunded because of the continuing resolution, but we have Doge and other leaders of the administration who are in agreement with what Doge is doing to control the funding or, to do other, this new word I just heard recently, impound it. I haven't ever heard it in that kind of sense with, government and funds. But he said, well, it would basically be like handing your credit card or increasing the credit card limit and then handing it over to Dave Ramsey, which if anybody knows anything about Dave Ramsey, he would immediately cut that credit card up. So I thought that was a pretty good point too.
Yeah, just because you have it doesn't mean you have to spend it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, just because you're funding a department that's being slashed at last year's budget levels doesn't mean that they're going to use all that funding.
Right. Yeah. So I thought both sides definitely made pretty interesting points, pretty good points.
I just think it's a matter of where you see us in, 2026?
Right.
On that side of the election. Right. Because if you see us with a smaller majority, or let's say a much smaller majority, or say we lose both houses, I would ask you, first of all, what is wrong with you? Why are you thinking that way? But second of all, you're going to think, well, let's spend all of our political capital now.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't agree with that. I see it more like I'm still hopeful. And I think people are waking up. This Doge stuff is exposing this stuff. It's showing you what they were using the money for. I think people are going to be more prepared to have these arguments on the congressional floor where they should have these arguments in the next cycle. That's where I'm at. I think it's going to look better.
Right.
That's where I'm hoping. I was hoping Trump would win. I felt it in my heart. It happened. There was a lot of noise saying otherwise. It happened. It came true. Came very much true. So I don't see why this idea of history and political capital can't just be thrown out the window too, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that we have as conservative Republicans, and it's not to die on this hill this moment. It's to keep the momentum going.
Right. That kind of makes me think of this other line from Eric Teasel. I'd have to look to get it exactly right, but it was about, he said it's, here, let me take a second to see if I can find it quickly. Okay, yeah, here it is. I lost it again. He works for some kind of organization. He said an often repeated mantra is positions versus interest. The position is that they're, typically against continuing resolution, but the interest is to squeeze as much out of this, opportunity as we can, which is, again, what you're saying.
Yes, it includes not burning your political capital.
Yeah. So I think both of these guys have good points, but
because
I feel like I'm still kind of on this side too. That I think now's our chance because we might not have it again. I mean, now's a chance to pass the continuing resolution, not to not pass it and do the reconciliation.
The harder course,
right? Yeah.
I think that's a bad way to go, because you have to look at how it plays out in public eyes. Because sure, okay. If you want to look at just brute force, you could do it. I don't see why you couldn't. You could make everybody sit down, and shoot that Goliath in the eye, make it government smaller for now. But you could also burn a lot of people, and you're going to. You're going to burn a lot of people by doing that. Then what comes up next? Okay, you're basically guaranteeing that there's not going to be any red wave come, midterm season, because those types of people, the reactionary people, are going to be out there voting D all the way because they're going to be so angry.
Yeah.
There's not going to be anything. There's going to be a red trickle, not a red wave. And the other thing is what's going to be the next big bill that really needs fixing? And then nobody's going to want to work with you because they're going to say, oh, well, you remember what you did over the, the size of the government? Yeah. Remember what you did? No, we don't want to help. We don't want to do this. Even if it's curing cancer, we're going to fund the cure. Nope. You're not going to have a lot of people that won't want to work with you.
Right. Yeah, I'll have a link to both of these opinion pieces for people to see them themselves. Again, I thought both sides had pretty interesting takes. But I think, kind of like what you're saying and Eric Teitzel's saying, it's probably a better time than now to just do the CR and then we can work.
Yeah, then you live to fight another day.
Right, yeah. Right.
I think that's much more important. But, well, what do you say to just staying with slightly controversial takes on stuff for a minute?
All right.
Because I heard a take on this thing that Ben Shapiro and the guys over at the Daily Wire are doing right now, where they have a petition sort of thing about this Derek Chauvin guy who was the cop who was involved with the death of George Floyd. And I guess they're calling on Trump to issue him some kind of a pardon. So have you heard about this at all?
I have not, interestingly enough. I think that's interesting. I didn't know it was coming from a petition that they're supporting.
Well, it's not even so much of a petition. I want to get into, there's a couple of layers to it.
Okay.
But just right off the grip, what do you think of the idea of pardoning this Derek Chauvin guy?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I guess I'm mostly indifferent. I guess from my understanding, a pardon that wouldn't be the same as an expungement, right?
Right.
Okay. I don't know. I guess I suppose I don't really have any feelings either way.
Well, let me make you aware of a
know.
couple things and see how you
Sure.
feel. First of all, this Derek Chauvin was tried in both state and federal court.
Right.
State court on like murder charges and this kind of thing, but federal for
like civil rights or something.
Yeah, abusing George Floyd's civil rights or whatever, revoking them or whatever, infringing on his rights, whatever.
Yeah.
So the presidential pardon would only work on the federal level for the federal civil rights violations or whatever. Wouldn't change.
I think I would probably support that because I certainly don't think his civil rights were violated. I think that's kind of a silly federal crime in a way, but...
Okay, but this whole thing, let me remind you of the conversation we just came off of, the idea of political capital and all of that. So, yeah, you're saying, okay, I guess I support it now because it wouldn't really matter that much. Well, let me ask you, what would it matter then? What would it matter at all then? Why would Trump even do the darn thing then? Isn't it just kind of an exercise in futility, an exercise in power, an exercise in political capital? He can do it because he can?
Yeah, it seems like.
Yeah, but it also just seems like it'd make a lot of people angry.
Yeah.
A bunch of headlines.
Yeah.
For no effect. What effect is it going to have?
Right.
The guy's still going to sit in state prison like he is on a murder charge.
Right.
That he's been convicted of.
Yeah.
Trump can't do anything about that. Can't do anything to get this guy his freedom. Even though people are already printing that. Trump's action could lead to the freedom of... Well, that's not true. Just a fake headline. But see, they're just whipping people up. It just whips people up.
Right.
And for what?
Yeah. I don't know. That's interesting.
Well, I think it's a bad idea just from that point of view. Because if Trump did it just because he could, and because he wants to troll the libs or whatever, I would say fine if it had some effect. If the guy really got out of jail or if it really did make a statement. But this is like poking a bee's hive that most people want to get away from. They don't want to talk about the George Floyd thing. That's sort of a make or break kind of thing. You know, if you have that conversation in the wrong office with the wrong person, you know, George Floyd is still sort of this line in the sand for our culture. It's not something that people like to talk about. And he's going to go forgive this guy for no reason, for no point.
Yeah.
Just to burn political capital.
Right. I suppose at least from that aspect, whether it make political sense or not, I think, as you're saying, no, it wouldn't. And I probably would say I wouldn't necessarily agree with it for that. But otherwise, it doesn't really matter to me, I guess.
I'd say let sleeping dogs lie.
Right.
That's the idiom that comes to mind for that one. But then let me add a couple more layers of controversy on you.
Here we go.
Ben Shapiro, apparently when this guy was first, you know, charged with these things, he had these tweets out saying that the guy was obviously wrong and he killed George Floyd and he obviously took his civil rights from him and all this stuff. So Ben's already back in history times when it happened in those moments making tweets saying that this guy's guilty, basically. So what do you think about that? Now that he's flip-flopped now after this trial and after some time's gone by and whatever, now he's got this petition thing on his website on the other side of the fence for this guy, saying Trump should issue him a pardon. That, mind you, Shapiro knows doesn't have any teeth. It's not going to do anything.
Right. I don't know. I guess it seems silly. I haven't seen those tweets myself. I'm not saying they're not true, but certainly if they are, it's a bit silly. I don't really get why.
Well, the evidence is linked in the show notes. I'll refer you to Mark Dies.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the big deal would be, other than probably more traffic to their media.
Bingo! That's what's really happening as part of this, like, non-petition or whatever, whatever it is you have to sign up. There's like a box that gets checked in the process that says, I want marketing emails from the Daily Wire. That's part of going and signing the petition, is you start getting these marketing emails and stuff from them, you know, saying, will you buy the whatever that, you know, what they sell over there.
Right.
So the whole thing's being called, because, you know, there's certain people, I might have just mentioned a particular person's name, actually, who don't really like a lot of these guys at the Daily Wire and see them as, I don't know. I'm just going to try to speak an innuendo and just say they're too big for their britches sometimes and that kind of thing. And they love to just call them out anytime that they do something wrong or step out of line or, you know, that kind of thing. So, you know, you can call it what it is or whatever. But I just thought the whole thing was interesting, just mostly because of the point that Ben Shapiro is a lawyer and he would know better than anybody that what he's asking for is like basically nonsensical. And as it's pointed out by Mark Dice, I'll say it one more time, you know, Ben knows a lot of these guys up there. They're all in the same circles and stuff, and he could probably call somebody, if he actually wanted this done, they could have a formal petition put forward. They could be making real moves with this. But instead it's just like a statement up on his website where you start getting marketing emails from it. So I just thought it was interesting, wanted to get your opinion on it. I don't always like to dog on Ben Shapiro, but you know, I do from time to time.
Right. I mean, it's definitely strange. I don't really get it. I hadn't heard about it until you're telling me about it now. And he's not even my favorite person. Andrew Clavin's the guy I come to see most of the time, and he's only on once a week.
Well, and I'm not trying to say any disparaging things about them.
No.
It just, some of that stuff, I like the way Mark does his analysis, and some of it to me was like, I could already tell where he was going before he said it. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't really make sense. Why argue for such a thing?
Yeah.
By the time he reveals to you that you start getting all the marketing stuff from their website, it's like, aha, of course, see, even you led to it, you know, before I could point it out.
Right.
So it makes sense. It's just kind of sad, I think, when you see people that you, at least at one point, respected, doing this just outright shilling for relevancy and attention.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really get it either. It doesn't make much sense to me.
Well, we're not above it. So if you think that Derek Chauvin should be free, no, I'm just kidding. That's just a joke.
Oh, gosh. Oh, yeah, that... I definitely know that the Daily Wire has been plenty criticized before, and I don't know. It's not that I ignore it because I don't believe it. I don't think it really matters to me. It's all, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for.
Well, I just think it's part of being human. I mean, somebody else in the same situation might make the same call.
Right.
I mean, this stuff's not crazy.
Right.
It's just like I said, it does kind of knock down somebody.
Yeah, it does feel kind of weird, but...
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm certainly the kind of person who knows how to disagree with even the people I do particularly like hearing opinions from.
Yeah.
So, it is what it is, I guess. I mean, it's a bit strange. We'll see what comes of it, I suppose.
Well, I'd love to know what the viewers think. I
Yeah.
mean, do you think Derek Chauvin deserves his sentence, or do you think a pardon by Trump would be anything but a political act?
Yep, you can let us know in the comments or send us an email. And I believe with that, we're going to move into our exclusive topics for this episode. So if you would like to hear those, you can become a paid subscriber through our podcast host, Red Circle. All right, well, I think that is all we have for today. You got anything else, Frank?
Nope, that's it.
All right, well, if you enjoyed this episode of Conservative Conversations, be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, many more. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to hear that extra segment, become a paid subscriber through our podcast host, Red Circle.
That's right. We hope you might also encourage a friend or family member to also become a paid subscriber so that they have access to the same bonus and exclusive content that you have access to. And as always, we thank you for listening.